Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm going to be looking at Alpine version 3.16, which came out this week. And stay tuned right after this. Alpine Linux 3.16. I have not done a video on Alpine in almost 2 years. So yeah, I think the last time I did it, I was showing you how to set up an in-memory model of it running. But today I go back, and this time we'll show you how to do a GUI, how to get that installed. Let's take a look at some of the features that are in Alpine Linux. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what is that? What is Alpine Linux? So Alpine Linux is a distro that's designed to be very small, very simple, and very secure. So that's been its philosophy since the very beginning. It replaces all of the commands that everybody else seems to be, they just pump like 300 utilities that go into your user bin, your user S bin directory, and they replace that with BusyBox. And so that reduces the footprint down because BusyBox, which has all those commands in it, only occupies about 300 kilobytes of disk space. They also replaced the GNU libc with Musil. They want a little bit faster, a little bit more responsive system. So now there's some caveats with Musil. Musil is not as full or robust a release as libc. Libc has all kinds of internationalization support in it. Musil does not. Musil has UTF-8 and ENUS as the language, and that's it. So if that works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, then this probably isn't going to be the right distro for you. But Alpine uses OpenRC instead of systemd. They just felt that systemd is way too big for what they're trying to do, and so they reverted back to OpenRC. And so all of these replacement tools provide a very fast, lightweight, and nimble experience. And so now the one thing to tell you is Alpine kind of has the same philosophy as Arch does. You start with a very small footprint, you build it up the way you want. You won't find all of the tools available to you unless you install them. So Alpine Linux began as a fork of the Leaf project. The Leaf project had kind of a strange mission. It was to fit an entire Linux distro on a floppy drive. Well, I think I took my last floppy drive out of a machine over 20 years ago. So yeah, I haven't had one around for quite some time. I bet if I looked in my junk pile, I might come up with one. Alpine forked off from that release because they wanted to add a couple of larger packages, which of course wouldn't fit on a floppy, and that was Squid and Samba. Alpha Linux has become widely used and widely known because it is installed in a huge number of Docker containers. So chances are if you download a Docker container from the Docker repos, you'll probably find Alpine is the operating system at the heart of it, unless it's Ubuntu or it's labeled as Debian. What are the system requirements in order to be able to run this? And I think this is probably going to surprise you a little bit. So if you're just running the CLI out of the box, you're not going to do anything else with it. 100 meg of RAM, that's all it takes. If you're installing a desktop, then you've got pretty much all the same demands that a desktop environment is going to place on your system. Gigabyte of memory, and then depending upon what you're doing, that could track upwards to 8 gig, just like it does on any other distribution. But the disk space requirements are about 700 megabytes, so it's still pretty small, and that would be for sys or data because those are allocating partitions on a hard drive for persistence. Sys that's more of a conventional type system where you have bootloaders and your typical file system that's built out that would look familiar to you. Data mode is kind of a hybrid. Alpine, for the record, wants to run out of memory because it is so tight and small. It wants to do most of its work out of memory. So data is kind of a hybrid. Most of the utilities run out of RAM, out of a RAM drive, and the rest of them for your persistence layer, like your home directory, for example, would be on a hard drive. But what do they recommend? So You need a CPU that's at least 32-bit or 64-bit. It could be Intel or AMD. They support ARM, both ARM 7 and ARM 64. They also support Raspberry Pis, by the way, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then there's also support for PowerPC. So they recommend about 2 gig, and of course, again, up to 8 if you need it. 4 gig of disk space, although in my testing, you don't need anywhere near that. And we'll look at that today and see exactly what it is taking after we install a desktop environment. And I'll install a heavy one just to get a worst case. So screen resolution is going to be about the same because if you're installing GNOME, that's the requirements for GNOME, the 1024 by 768. So the Linux kernel that it's using is 5.15. Now you might think, oh, well, that's a couple of releases behind, but they're using the 5.15 LTS kernel. So that is current as far as the long-term support. So that was released back in October of 2021. It brought a number of things like a new NTFS driver. There's also KSMBD, which is a kernel level Samba server, which is interesting. I haven't played with that, but it is there and available. Also, they've added some support for the Apple M1. I don't think this is the very beginning of where they started adding Apple M1 support into the Linux kernel, but this one adds on IOMMU support for pass-through. Also, it supports the NVIDIA Jetson. Now, this is the older TX board release. That's the SBC single board computer. So then as far as support for Intel Alder Lake, you have support for that, and there's also groundwork support for AMD's Science Skillfish and also Intel's advanced graphics, and just both for the mobile platform, the XeHP, and the DG2 Alchemist, which is the discrete board. There's also a new AMD, I think that's correct. If it isn't, please let me know. There's also a new AMD Van Gogh APU audio driver, and that benefits Steam Deck. So yeah, it's interesting that now this isn't the distribution that Steam Deck uses, but they do have support for it. There's improvements that were made to ext4 and to ButterFS, which just make it a little bit more, in ext4's case, it makes it a little faster in certain I/O. And then in ButterFS's case, it makes it a little bit more stable with particular configurations. So what are the changes that you can expect to find in Alpine Linux? Well, it has better support for NVMe drives, and there's an administrator user key generation that you can add to the system. There's also support for adding SSH keys. Now, I don't know if those are certificates or just the old keys that we're used to. There's also a new script that they've added in this release that makes it a lot easier to install a desktop environment. I don't know if you've tried to install desktop environments on the older versions of Alpine, but it can be a little tricky and a little confusing. I know that I had a number of messages from viewers on my channel that looked at some of the Alpine Linux videos and said, I cannot get this to work. And yeah, it was tricky. It was tricky to get it to work. They had the installation steps split between multiple wiki pages, one for setting up Xorg, and then there was a whole bunch of caveats in there about what if you're using this driver, do this, and that driver, do that. Yeah, that gets a little wild. So they decided to put everything into one script and just make the whole thing easier. So sudo is being moved from the main repository to community. The reason for that is I think Alpine is going to deprecate sudo in favor of doas. And doas is making inroads into other Linux distributions as well. So that might be a direction that other distros follow. Now, can't always guarantee that, don't know. But it says DOS. Sorry about that. It should be DOAS, doas. Also, they've deprecated PHP 7 and Python 2, which of course are obsolete versions. As far as the toolchain updates in 3.16, Go's been upgraded to 1.18. LLVM is version 13. Node.js is current at 18.2. Now that's at the time of their release. Ruby 3.1, Rust 1.60, and of course GNOME 42, and then Plasma 5.24. Also, the KDE applications that go along with it have been updated as well. I guess the first thing we need to do is to run through and install. This will be pretty trivial. It's not very hard to install Alpine Linux. So let me get set up and I will be right back. Okay, so I guess you can kind of see I have, let me get my cursor back here. Here we go. So I have set this up right here, and I'll go ahead and start that, and we'll get the console going here. And then I'm going to not maximize. Let's minimize that, get it off the screen. And we'll blow this up a bit so that you can see what I'm seeing. A little bit easier maybe, instead of an eye chart. Yeah, that kind of blows up a little bit, but not a lot, does it? Okay, so you can see that the boot process is very streamlined. This sort of reminds me of some of the early days of Linux. I mean, it was pretty similar, where it didn't seem to take a whole lot of steps in order to get launched. So yeah, this kind of reminds me of those days. Now Unix, it was slow, so it took a long time to bring those up. But all right, so you log in as root. There's no password initially, so we'll have to set one, and it will collect one from us. At this point, I can do a number of functions. I could go partition my drive. I could go do some other things here, but I'm just going to do a setup Alpine, and that's the basic OS install for the client side. Okay, and then it's going to ask me, what is your keyboard layout? And it's US. And what is your actual, I think, let's see if there's one for US by itself, and there is. So that's all I need for that one. And then it asks me for a host name. I'm just going to let it default to localhost. It asks me about, it says I found Ethernet 0, and that's right, that's the one I want to use. DHCP is fine. I could go in and do a static, yeah, I could put it in as static, but that's okay. I don't have anything else to do with that. And so now it's going to ask me for a password for root. So we'll go ahead and set that up. Oop, didn't like it. Now it did. And then time zone, leave it at UTC is all I'm going to do. I don't have a proxy. Now I could say, this is asking me to select a mirror that's near me. So I know that one is close to me, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and set up a user. Yep, just type in the name of the user ID that you want to use, and then give it the full name, and then a password. And if there's a SSH key that you have, you can put that in. Otherwise, I'm going to let it go to, it's asking me, what do I want to run for SSH? I can do drop bear or OpenSSH. I want to do OpenSSH. And then we'll put this to SDA. And I'm doing a install. Now this allows me to choose which one of those I want to use. So I could do a help here. Let's see what options we actually have. So we have sys, and then it gives you a little bit of explanation here on each of these. So yeah, so I just want to do sys, a traditional disk install. And it's asking me to confirm that I want to erase SDA, and I do. And now it's installing. So that's it. As soon as this is done, that's it. I'm done. I have installed the base operating system, so we'll reboot. And then it will boot to the SDA drive, or from the SDA drive, I should say. Okay, and then I can sign, I'm going to sign in as root because I'm missing something here. Yeah, if I look at my, let's see, password file, you'll notice that it's going to home me to /home DJ where, and there is no directory in there, so I need to make one. And I also need to change the owner from root because root created it. And now DJ Werq should be able to log in. Let's see if it's got a IP address, and it does. So before we get too far, let's see how much disk space it is actually taking here. And it looks like 104.5 meg is in use. As far as memory, it looks like we're using 62 meg. So yeah, it's not much. It's not much. And my IP address is 118. Okay. And we'll have to remove the collision with something that used that earlier. So we'll do that. Okay, so I'm in, and I should have my directory fine. Now, the only thing, this will not work. I don't think. Did it put me in wheel? It did. Really? Oh yeah, it did. There's wheel. So it's already added me to wheel. So I'm an administrator already. So that's good. I don't have to do anything else to set this up. So, and again, you will not find sudo here. So if you want that, you're going to have to install it yourself. So I guess the first thing we need to do is, I'll leave this for a minute here. I think what I need to do, I'll come back to that. So I think what I need to do right now is get my desktop set up. So this is the script to do that. And you have to do it once you have run it. You know, of course, you're not in sysinit mode anymore. So you're going to be in a run level, probably a 5, maybe a 4. But then you'll have to switch back to a sysinit level if you want to change this. So it'll let you do it the first time because I am running in sysinit level here, as far as RC is concerned. It has a check for that. So you notice it's going through all of those. One thing I'll tell you is APK, the package manager, it is a single step. It does, a lot of them copy down the repository to your system first, and then it installs it. Well, this does it all in one step. So it copies and installs in the same step. And it has some enhancements that make it really quick in order to do that. So, okay, so we're all done. We've just installed GNOME 42, and I'm going to go reboot. And hopefully, cross my fingers, hopefully it'll come up with in GDM to log in with. And it did. So I'll go ahead and click on this. Let's see, let's see what we're actually running in. So I am running in Wayland. I think what I really want to do is I don't want to run under Wayland. No, I don't think so. So, oops. Not happy, is it? Let's try that one more time. Okay, now it's happy. And say, no thanks, I don't really want to take the tour. So let's just, now, when I was running under Wayland, I ran into a number of issues where the cursor wasn't registered properly and the mouse wasn't registered properly. So one of the things I'll tell you is that is not there. Now I think there may be some instructions on their site on how to get the store up, but it isn't currently there. So we can explore around a little bit. And yeah, so there's the CD-ROM from the install. So we can go ahead and pop that out. That looks good. That looks good. I'm just trying to see how it is. Yeah, it's registered all right. It's holding the registration. So that's good. That's good. So let's go into, let's see if we can really screw it up. Let's go in and change the settings on it. So let's, here we go. We'll live dangerously. We'll go in and change the screen display size. Just something that I always like to use was just that. Hey. All right. And then appearance will go up here. This was working a lot better than it was under Wayland. So I guess my problems I was having are not driver related, they're Wayland related. So yeah, Wayland has a few quirks, no doubt about it. All right, so good, excellent, that worked. Excellent, that's working. Living dangerously. Let's try changing the theme. All right, so let's do a do as. I want to do an APK add. This is how you add packages. Now, if you want to know what the commands are, you'll notice that man is not, the man pages are not installed. I mean, again, light, lean, and mean. There are instructions in the wiki for Alpine that tell you if you want to do that, you can do that. And they show you a shortcut where you can go in and pick up all the package doc files that are ready to be installed, and it'll pile them all up and install them all at once for you, so you don't have to go one by one through them all. So I'm looking for add, which is right there, and then there's delete to remove them. So we'll do a do as APK add, and I need get glances htop neofetch, my usual. Okay. One other thing I would tell you about this is if you're going to install something like NFS, for example, you'll find that I can do an APK search for NFS, and you'll see NFS utils, which is correct, but that is the full installation. That's a server as well. I don't see it broken out for a client only. So if you want NFS, just install the NFS utils. I know it's over. That's not exactly what I would want to do either, but that is what you need to do here because there isn't one broken out that I know about. Now, if one of these have it in it, great, but I didn't see any information about that, and maybe I missed it. So correct me if I'm wrong, please. I don't know everything, and it's good to always learn from you guys too. So what else do we want to do here? So let's take a look at what our current situation is. Let's look at htop. 521 meg is what it's using, and so we always blame GNOME for the amount of memory that it's taking. Yes, it takes a lot, but nobody ever says anything about systemd and glibc. I mean, those two things are absolute. They're giant. They're huge. So yeah, and don't forget, there's other packages on the system that are occupying tons more memory than just your desktop interface. So this is a pretty good telling as to what's going on there. So what about disk? How much did we add? So we're now taking about 1.6 gig or so. So I mean, that is quite a bit more than it was, right? But it's nowhere near what Ubuntu has taken. But again, remember, we don't have near as many packages installed that some of those others do. Let's just see how many packages we actually have. I like to do shorthand, so 630 packages. And what do we have under Ubuntu? Was it 2,000 packages or more? May have been more, but yeah, quite a bit more. So yeah, all right. So last thing to do here. Let's go out to opt. Let's do do as get clone. I'm going to put out Linus. And we're going to run it. Oddly enough, Linus is pretty adaptable to a lot of different systems, and Linus does sort of know about Alpine. It doesn't recognize everything. Like, for example, you get an exception, it couldn't find the kernel module. So yeah. But we'll let this run through, and then we'll see what we get for kind of a baseline. So I'm just going to let this kind of walk through here. All right, let's just roll it back a little, and we can take a look at what's going on. All right, so there's some warnings. GRPCK. I've seen this before. This usually is, there's a duplicate in here somewhere, where the group IDs or the group numbers are shared between two different groups. That's not good, but it's easy to fix. No password set for the single mode, and klogd is not running. And of course, yes, you will get flags for that in Linus. That's the same on all the ones I've ever run. Add rounds, that's the same. Hashing rounds, expiration dates on passwords, password aging. And then the single mode, that's new, right? And then a default UMask in profile. Yeah, we've seen that before. Seen that UMask in login defs. Seen that before. Our /home/var. Did they stop talking? They stopped talking about temp? I guess they did. I have a USB driver on, but yeah, okay. I probably would whitelist that one because I probably would always have a USB driver on. Yeah, it doesn't like that. So, I mean, that's because of my laziness and not giving it a real host name. If you do give it a host name, then it's going to expect the DNS and it would fail there. So, audit tools, and then these things need to be put in. Packet filters, so I need some kind of firewall, which I don't have. It's odd that in this version of Linus, it isn't making this a warning. It knows I don't have, I don't know, something going on there. R shell, ooh, not good. I would get rid of that and use the more secure SSH, so I would remove that package. And it could be that R shell might be a member of BusyBox, so, but there are some ways to disable that. Yeah, TFTP, yeah, that's bad. That's really bad. You don't want to ever use TFTP. Banner, accounting, NTP daemon. Yeah, the problem with TFTP is it's really easy to log in and become root, and then they have file transfer rights on your system. So it's a piece of cake to do it. Yeah, the rest of those look the same. Got an overall score of 65, 221 tests. So a couple of surprises, I guess, and it might be just because it's running under BusyBox, but I'll dig into it. The other thing to let you know is I'm probably not going to do the benchmarks today. I'll probably have to do a separate video on those. Alpine is more challenging to get the packages that you need. Now, as far as the base packages are concerned, that's pretty easy. So I can get the base packages that I need to support Phoronix Test Suite, but each test you run has a set of dependencies as well. So, and that is where you run into trouble sometimes. So, and those, although Phoronix Test Suite does know about Alpine, but it does not seem to do a very good job of picking up the packages it needs out of the APK repository. So you have to do that yourself. You have to resolve those dependencies yourself and figure out which ones you actually need in order to satisfy the builds. I did notice on one of the times I compiled that, and of course, as I said, Alpine is a very slimmed down install. So you don't even have the system header files out here or the standard IO header files out here. Yeah, so yeah, okay. And all right. So I think that's all I wanted to see from here. Yeah, what are some of my final thoughts on this? I don't need to have that up here. So first of all, Alpine is very fast to install, as you saw. The package manager is very quick as well. However, it isn't as rich as, say, a Debian or an Arch or even an Ubuntu is, or even as rich as Red Hat, and it's in Fedora and that line. So it does not have as many packages around it. But remember, it's a pretty small team that works on this. So yeah, I mean, if you want more packages, maybe help them out. Help them out and get it done. And then you too can add the packages that you want in their repos. there are two repos that are defined, and you'll find those in Etsy APK. And there's a file called repositories. There are two general classifications. There is the version, like 3.16, and then there's one called Edge. And I believe Edge is the next generation or next version of the system. Those are commented out by default. Normally, when you install Alpine, the community, even in the versioned repos, even that one is commented out. But when I ran through this, it uncomments it as soon as I do the update to put on a desktop environment. So yeah, it automatically uncomments or creates a new entry for it. It looks like is what it did. So what do I think of it? I think they've made a heck of a lot of improvements in a very short period of time. And it's good to see it. The improvements they're making are going to make it more likely for someone to use this. Is this designed for older hardware? Well, not really. I mean, you see it's a 5.17 kernel. So you're going to find, it's 5.15 kernel, excuse me. It's a 5.15 kernel, and there will be older drivers that have been deprecated out of there. So, yeah, can it be used on older hardware? Probably up to a point, yeah. Probably up to a point. But it's really designed to be a lightweight footprint. You can install Alpine on a USB stick. So if you want to do that, there is instructions on the wiki on how to follow those steps in order to make that happen. I haven't done that personally, but if that's of interest to you, leave a comment below and I'll get to it and work on it. So that's basically all I had for today. I hope you enjoyed this look at Alpine Linux 3.16. It has direct support for VMware, virtual machines, also VirtualBox has direct support for that. Now, it does do kind of a broad KVM QEMU, so it doesn't have anything specifically for Proxmox or for XCP-ng or for even VirtBox or boxes, known boxes. So, but there are drivers in there that will allow you to handle your displays and that sort of thing. So, and I'll leave you with that. How well those all work, I don't know. I haven't tested every single aspect of the distribution. That would take more time than a couple of days. So, hope you enjoyed this today. Please like and subscribe. Hope to see you all again real soon, and bye for now.